only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. Well, welcome to my podcast, and to those who follow me every week, you'll know that strange things happen. There's very little choice that I have in what happens, and something always amazing seems to happen. This week I find myself in Berlin, in Germany. I'm still on an extended holiday. So that's why, again, the sound is a bit unusual. And also I still have that cold as of last week, but I think I'm getting a bit better. But this week, as normal, a few days before I sat down to do this podcast, I had a very strong impression from my guardian angel, Titan, that I was going to receive a very special visitor today. And I can't really make it any less dramatic than it is already, but I obviously questioned her, and I said, well, how come somebody like that would want to come and speak? And anyway, to cut straight to the chase, it's actually the ex-Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II. Now, that probably might send a lot of people running to the hill straight away, and I think I was questioning that of all the people in the world that she would want to contact, why would she choose me? And immediately that response came through that I have to just put away once and for all this hierarchical feeling that we as humans have, that somehow because she was the Queen of England or the Queen of the United Kingdom, she is somehow better than me, or her soul is better than me, or there is some sort of hierarchy that means I should show some form of deference. That is obviously complete rubbish, and it's nothing of the sort. And in fact, I was told that she has actually been observing my project, as have a number of other people, particularly associated with her in her state that she's in at the moment. And she is very pleased to come through, and I don't know how long this podcast will last because I have so many questions, and I've been burning, unlike any other of the podcasts I've done so far, to ask these questions and see what sort of answers I can get. So there we are. So it's going to be asking Queen Elizabeth II, who I believe died a short while ago. I have to get the date right. And see exactly what she wants to say and why she's chosen to come through to me today. Well, through the magic of Google, I can see that Queen Elizabeth II died on the 8th of September 2022 at the grand old age of 96 years old. So I will just get myself ready, and when I come back, I hope that Queen Elizabeth II will be here to talk to me. Okay, so here we are. So, Queen Elizabeth, I know that you've been contacting me in my dreams for the last 3 or 4 days, and I know that you're going to speak directly to me rather than through Titan. And I'm really thrilled that you chose to come and speak with me, and thank you. Could you please just confirm who you are and what I should call you? She's saying to me that I can call her Elizabeth if I like. She doesn't mind being called Elizabeth. And she before we speak, she says, I would like just to tell you something that is really very important. She says she chose to speak through me because she's very interested in the project that I'm doing, and she feels that there's a lot of interest with the people surrounding her in talking about who she was, what is she now, and exactly the purpose of the type of entity that she is now, and how she manifested as the Queen Elizabeth II that we knew her. She tells me that she chose me because there are not that many people in the world really who are doing what I'm doing, and I suppose that's true. She felt that the format that I'm using is something that would be very easy to use, and she felt that she could express herself quite well through me, and that I'd have an understanding of things. And that's nice. So if I could just ask then, clearly, what is your situation now? You obviously passed last year in September. Can you tell me a little bit about how you experience things now? Again, she wants to make it very clear that there is something that needs to be said so people can understand. She says, so you can understand where she is now and where she was before, and the context and the communication. She's saying the very simple communication process that exists between her and me is something that she says is something that we need to talk about. She says that as Queen Elizabeth II, she ceased to be when she died. She is no longer the Queen Elizabeth II. And she points out to me, she's saying, remember last week when we were talking about that, she said, I was talking about the fact that when you die, everything that was you, your consciousness, goes back to the root consciousness, which is an amalgam of many consciousnesses, collection of almost innumerable numbers of souls that have congregated around a common, if you like, manifestation, a common entity, a sort of collective consciousness. And I am now speaking, she says, to that collective consciousness. I'm not talking to a person called Queen Elizabeth II. She wants to be absolutely sure about that, and she says, you must reiterate that if you are a psychic medium and you are talking to someone, you're not talking to them as if they were alive. It's really important you understand that. So she says she's really not interested, and nobody at her spiritual level would be interested in talking about anything that has happened as the entity that she was after the moment of death. However, all the memories and all the experiences and all the feelings and indeed interpretations of events since are something that she can talk about in terms of the reasoning that would apply had she been alive. But most of it, she said, will be memory, and it will be mainly talking about how she is now as the consciousness that she finds herself in. And she wants also to say that she finds it quite amusing, and she says she finds it quite surprising, because she uses this expression that, in theory, she's as dead as a jugged hare, she said. And she said that to me yesterday. She wanted two expressions. She wanted to be dead as a pheasant and dead as a jugged hare, which is really strange because I don't think I've heard of either expression before. And maybe, did you use those expressions in your life? And she said, yes, she did. But she is now dead as a jugged hare. But for that purpose only, she wants to start off by saying exactly what she's now learned, or remembered, in fact, since she came back to her root consciousness. And she said that when she was Queen Elizabeth II, she didn't really have much idea at all about what she knows now, which is the purpose, but she feels that now she knows something way more than what she knew in her life. It's a wonderful time for her to be able to express that to people and anybody who's particularly interested in listening. She said there's no great big secret in this. She says, as usual, some people will believe, some people will not believe, and that's fine, and that's as it is. And she's asking me if I'd like to ask a question. Well, I certainly would. I would say to her, look, the thing that came into my mind, knowing that I was going to speak to you, was there must be so many people in your root consciousness, if you like, who would be interested in manifesting themselves as the ruler of a country, like you were, like the Queen of England, the Queen of the United Kingdom. How do you choose? Who chooses to come back and be queen? Because from my point of view, it must be the dream ticket to be reborn as the future monarch of a country and to enjoy such wealth and such privilege. She's saying to me that there are some special circumstances that need to be discussed straight away. And she said she'll use this ancient expression, which was called the divine right of kings. And she said there is some truth in that. She said that not everyone can just decide that they want to come back and be monarch. And she says, again, she's laughing, and she says, if everyone did that, there'd be some form of sort of horse race or scrum, she says, where we are, of people wanting to come back as Queen Elizabeth II. She says, no, most definitely, she is part of a collective consciousness of which many members are the sort of souls that do manifestate themselves as leaders and heads of governments or kings and queens. And this is the way it's always been throughout the choice of Earth history. And so she's saying to me that the choice for her to become queen and reborn as a monarch of England is something that was automatically a process because of the part of the collective consciousness that she is one of. And these people stick together. They're very much a family of consciousness. And she says that it's done this way because the responsibility, the enormity of being a leader or a person like a monarch is so great that you can't just be born as that and not have any experience of previous lives and previous memories and all the consciousness and all the feeling that comes with it. You need all that backing. You need that cushion. You need that groundwork behind you in order to be that. So could I say that you have been a monarch more than once? And she said, yes, most certainly. She has been a monarch through various time scales, in various realities, some at the same time. And Queen Elizabeth II was one of the ones that she was. And okay, so you could actually be a monarch somewhere in the world right now? And she said she wouldn't want to discuss that. That is something. She says we must have some ground rules, Philip. There's some things that I will not discuss, and that she says are things that would affect human history, would make people make decisions that she felt could jeopardize the way things have been planned to be. But what she will say is that all the members of the royal family, of which she says she's aware of, have all been designed to be in that place. So if you want, she says, if we go back to this idea of the divine right of kings, yes, if you like it, there is some form of divinity, she says, because only a certain group of people will get that chance to become kings, or in many respects, leaders of religions or leaders of society. She says the reason for that is very simple. Apart from this need to have that backing and that group consciousness and that experience, it's also because people put a lot of faith in the existing families, and they create a huge amount of physical consciousness that is imbued in the families because of their worship. And she's giving me an example of, say, the Thailand royal family, where she says, again she's laughing, where they believe that the king is almost God himself. And she said, of course that's not true. He's part of this collective consciousness, but this goes through history. And she's saying also it's the same when you look at whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism. If the Dalai Lama, she's saying, the Dalai Lama is a very good example of where the religion has actually progressed to the point that they believe that the child is the automatic rebirth of the Dalai Lama. And she said, in a way, that is the truth. And the present king, King Charles, her son, in the physical realm, is also the rebirth of other great religious or political leaders in our history. Okay, so that's really fascinating to me. So, in a way, all this human history of this belief that kings and queens had some form of almost automatic divine right to rule is, in a funny way, sort of correct, is it? And she said, yes, it is. And she said she obviously only realized that at the point where she died and she rejoined her collective consciousness. And she says to me that it's very important that she stresses to people that when she was the monarch, she was automatically responsible to be the head of the Church of England. And she said that's very interesting because, and she said, people who knew me, and there are a few people who knew me very, very well in terms of my religious beliefs, and I confided in certain people. She said, I'm not going to tell you who, but they will know who they are. I confided in them more than once that I doubted my faith. I couldn't actually quite understand the Christian faith. I did doubt it at times, but always I was encouraged by one or two of my spiritual helpers to understand that I mustn't get too hung up about the Christian faith and just realize that I represented a very important thread of history that has been going on for thousands of years and will go on for thousands of years. And Christianity is, if you like, a coat hanger that she could hang her faith on. And for that reason, it was of tremendous importance to her. But she didn't understand why. But she did have this inkling that Christianity was not everything. And a couple of her spiritual guide people would talk to her about it. And she's actually also saying to me that nobody really knew in her life. One or two very close companions did know that she had a very deep psychic belief. And she's saying now she couldn't talk about this publicly. She had many experiences in her family of this, of being visited by people who had passed on. But she certainly couldn't talk about it because it would have caused, she said, almost a constitutional crisis. And might have even have gotten her locked up because people would think she was mad. And she said, this is something that she could only really discuss now. She's also saying to me that it's very important that people understand that when you pass on, you lose that life, but you gain all the previous feelings and all the previous lives and all the various other things that your consciousness is doing. And it was only at that point that she began to sort of almost wake up and realize quite who she had been and why she was able to be that person. I have to ask you something. This comes from my friend Linda. When I told her that this may happen today, she was very interested in, and please don't laugh, but in this conspiracy theory that I think has been peddled by a guy, I can't remember his name now, and he tried to make out that you, as the Queen and members of the royal family, were somehow some sort of reptilian species or something, that were an alien species that were masquerading or shape-shifting. And you're aware of all of that. And she's absolutely in hysterics. And she said, it's all true. She says, it's all completely true. But she says, what it is that it is true that some people could probably detect that, unlike a lot of other people who are in a sort of a consciousness state when they're not physical, her particular collective consciousness is different from a lot of other people's, because it represents something that stays in a way as a pattern, as things that are somehow done as a smaller group. And for that reason, he said that some people have been able to feel that, and have been able to feel that she's not, strictly speaking, part of the human race in terms of the choices that other consciousnesses made when they chose to come and become human. She had to be slightly different because her consciousness, her group consciousness, has decided to do what they do, which is to work through monarchies and leaderships. So yes, people could perhaps see us as slightly different. But she said, in terms of being a lizard or anything, she said, I'm sorry, that really is not the case. Why do you think this person would say such a thing then, if you're not a lizard or a reptilian? She says, look, it's the same sense that there are people out there who want to define what life is about, and they have their own ideas, and they have their own audience, and they have their own market, and they sell books. She says, shall we just leave it like that? But I can assure you, she said, that she's not reptilian and she's not a lizard. And although she says that, of course, there are realities where what we would call reptiles or lizards do live conscious lives. and do have experiences that you could say are almost human and have societies. But she said definitely the Earth plane is not one of them. And neither she or her husband, the late husband, or any of her friends and family were lizards consciously. Although some of them, she said, some of them certainly acted like it sometimes. And they were a bit cold and they were a little bit lacking humanity at times. Well, it's interesting you mention that, because I think some people who probably have seen things like the episodes of The Crown or any of these other things, who didn't know you, would have the very strong impression that you were a certain type of person, and that in some ways I think it was almost made out that you were very cold and heartless, and I think particularly concerning your late daughter-in-law, Diana, or perhaps even your own son, Charles, or perhaps more lately with Meghan and Harry. Have you got anything you could say about that? She's wagging her finger at me, and she said, look, you're asking some things that I really don't want to talk about, but she's happy to address it in general. She says that if you want to take the sense that I was cold or somehow indifferent towards people, she said that was not true, and nothing could be further from the truth. That she could absolutely assure anyone who wants to listen that she really was not cold or indifferent to people, but she had a tremendous responsibility. She had to do what she was destined to do, and in respect of the crises, she says, that happened during her reign in terms of Diana, or maybe with Harry and Meghan and other members of the royal family, she said this is all as it should be. They're doing everything that they are supposed to be doing. There is no mystery in this, she says. Please don't think that anything that is happening now has not already been chosen to happen. She said, I want to give you one small example. She said when Princess Diana died in the car crash, she's saying this caused a lot of controversy at the time. She said that she's fully aware of the impact that would have, and that, again, some theories would be raised that maybe she was even killed by members of her own family or members of the state. She says that she cannot comment too much on that because this could cause some problems amongst people still alive. But she is saying there is some truth, that there was a tremendous feeling amongst great numbers of people that in a way Diana was causing a lot of problems, and she needed to, and she's using this expression, she needed to be got rid of. She was fully aware of that, as was her family. There was no secret in this. And the strength of feelings and thoughts can become a reality if enough people wish it to happen, and if it's a strong enough belief. And she said there was most definitely a very strong negative belief that became a reality as a result of what people were thinking about her. And that, of course, she said, ended in her death, her premature death. She said she must also point out that with people like Meghan and Harry, she said, I love them. These people were either my children or they were the closest people to my children. There's not a bone in her body that would have hated anyone or resented anyone, because my job was to very much keep everyone together, to try to allow as much expression as I could that wouldn't cause too much trouble, that would keep the institution that she was designed to maintain going. But now, sitting from where she is, she just wants to say that if you want to talk about Harry and Meghan, they are doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing. And she said, can I just leave it at that? Yes, you can, but I mean, in a way, people would say that that's not actually very constructive to the royal family, because it might end up causing the royal family to end. She said, look, I can tell you now that the royal family will end. It's not something that's going to be going on for another 200 years. She said it's possible that the way things are shaping up, and this is semi-fluid because all the strings are in place, all the planning has been done. Eventually, the royal family will end. It'll cease to be. And all the things that have been happening in the past, the things that are happening now, are designed to be happening in order to facilitate that process. She is fully aware that this is something that's going to be a shock to some people because they believe the royal family will be there forever. But nothing is there forever. She said she was very privileged to be able to do what she did. She's deeply proud of the people who are working hard to maintain things. But things are happening for a reason. And eventually, maybe even in my own lifetime, the royal family as we know it will cease to exist. Wow, well, that's quite a statement, and I'm rather surprised to hear that. And she said, don't be surprised to hear that. I mean, it's something that I think people probably read into my actions and the actions of people around me. She said you could almost use a sense that people thought the family was imploding in a way. She said, but that is it's a very false way to describe it. History is being changed. All of us, she said, in that royal family were part of a consciousness that had one aim, and that was to maintain and to run that monarchy. But the history of the monarchy will change. It's always changed. Monarchies have come and gone, and they're not forever. And most definitely the monarchy of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is something that is not there to stay forever. And the current people, William and Kate and Charles, will not know this directly, but people, from where she is now, are working through them. Their consciousnesses are constantly connected, and they, she says, will make the right decisions that will make the monarchy go the way that it is supposed to go. I have to ask again, because I suppose, how many times am I ever going to get the chance to talk to the entity that was Queen Elizabeth II? I mean, when you talk about such massive social and political stories as the death of Princess Diana, and you sort of hint to me that, yes, maybe there was negative action, and that maybe some people were involved in her death. Are you actually saying that she was killed? And she's saying to me, she wasn't killed in a direct sense. She wasn't murdered by one person. She says that there were a collection of people. And she's saying to me, you might remember Kennedy's assassination, and people wondered if there was more than one person. Can I say, was there more than one person? And she said, yes, most definitely. And I think she says more and more people are becoming aware of that. And very recently, she says, I think people on Earth were becoming aware that there was a far more wider conspiracy to kill John Kennedy than has been hitherto accepted. And she said, I can only say that is the same with Princess Diana. There were a lot of people, and a lot of this information, she says, will come out at one point, because things are kept under lock and key for most of people's lifetime in order to protect them. But she said it will come out that there was a big conspiracy in order to shut her up. And we, of course, were aware of that. Members of my family are aware of that. Not all, but members of the family are aware of that. And it's something that is just part of history. But we shouldn't get too hung up about it, because in the end it serves the purpose. She said it served the purpose because something had to change anyway. It was inevitable, given the state of society and the way the royal family should evolve, that in a way she would become a catalyst and cause a lot of change and questioning of the future of the royal family. And she said this is being carried on in a way through the remaining members of the royal family, who are also part of this process of making it change. Again, she talks about Meghan and Harry, and she's saying just how respectful and proud she is of them. And she feels it's very sad that people take out such anger and hatred towards them, because they are doing, semi-unconsciously, what they are supposed to do. And, maybe one day we on Earth will realize that. Yeah, so in a way, yes, while it's a great privilege to have been Queen Elizabeth II, in a way it's a bit of a burden, isn't it? Because you came into this world as a chosen monarch, as someone who would eventually become Queen Elizabeth II, and you were going to have to make semi-unconscious decisions, weren't you, about what was going to happen around you. And she said, yes, of course, all of this I'm only aware of at the point that I ceased to be alive, and we rejoin our consciousness here. And where I can see it now is almost like a spectator. And she said, laughingly, everyone always rather enjoyed this idea that I loved horses most. So I did like horses, but I didn't like horses most. I enjoyed my family the most. That was the most important thing to me. And that is the history of her family. But where she is at the moment, she is a spectator. And there is a to and fro communication between the people that remain and the consciousness where she is, which incorporates all the people that have been members of the royal family. Oh, so you're saying that Princess Diana and your late husband and kings and everything going back are all part of your collective consciousness? I said, most definitely. We're all here, although we're not as we were. We are all part of this consciousness. If you want, we're all soulmates, and we're all involved in the affecting of history, but also the guidance. It's part of what we have chosen to do, is to guide humanity in a particular direction and to help humanity as much as we can. We're not setting out to harm humanity or do things that are wrong. She's just saying to me that she hasn't got much longer that she wants to speak at this point. But there is one thing that she also wants to talk about because she thinks it's important again. And she says if there's one thing that she wishes that she could change from where she is at the moment, it would be that if she could get people to understand that they need to have more compassion and more feeling towards the humanity of the people who are in the royal family. She feels particularly saddened how people have become so personal and so abusive to certain members of the family. And if only they could realize that they just didn't have a choice. This was part of what her entity is involved in trying to help humanity. And it's been going on for thousands of years. And for people to criticize members of the royal family, she finds is a little bit hard. She understands that people would be jealous, or people would hold them up to a very high standard, which usually, she says, when you hold people to high standards, they're likely to disappoint you. But she says that so much of the stuff that is said and written about her family is very untrue. But looking down at it from now, she can understand that, yes, certain members of the royal family have made mistakes and have done some stupid things and some really, truly awful things. And the fact that they will be held they will be held for account for it, and she thinks it's completely right. And she says there will be some bigger news coming up in the next year or two about a certain member of the royal family. She feels that this will be important to society because, again, it's all about influencing the course of history, influencing the course of change, getting people to understand how things need to move on with the times. And if someone big enough and more important than the average person in the street is caught doing something wrong, that example, she says, is very important in terms of establishing a better trend for the future. Well, thank you very much, but there is another question. I really have so much to ask you, but I know that I can't monopolize all your time. And I must say I'm feeling quite tired. I do feel that this connection is very different from one that I've had before. And I can only say to you who's listening that it's a joyous experience. I mean, I'm not frightened. I'm not feeling at all intimidated by who's here. It seems to be very, very loving and very friendly. No sense of hierarchy. I absolutely feel like I'm talking to a friend. And I'm really enjoying that prospect. If I could just then maybe finish off by asking you, Elizabeth, is there any kind of, since it might be the last chance for a while, is there anything, any message, maybe any big message or anything that you would like to talk about now that you've left your physical body and now you're back in your entity, your consciousness, is there any message that you want to give that I could relay to the world? She's showing me all sorts of visions, and I must say, in a way, it does sound maybe slightly predictable, but I'll say it anyway, because if there's one thing I've learned now, if I start guessing or second-guessing what I'm seeing or hearing and censoring myself, it doesn't really help, because usually it's right. So I'll say what I'm seeing, and basically she's showing me conflicts, she's showing me the wars in Israel and Gaza, she's showing me Russia and Putin and Ukraine, she's showing me political leaders around the world, the United States she's mentioning, the United Kingdom as well, France, Germany, and she says, and there's no real surprise that she's talking to me while I'm situated in Berlin. She said Berlin was the capital of Germany before the war, and then a capital later on after the wall came down, but it saw the creation of the Nazi regime, which many people would view as, she says, probably one of the most destructive and cruel regimes that mankind has ever created. She feels it's very important to talk to me and to talk through me to everyone who's listening from Berlin in Germany, because it represents an incredibly strong, she says, physical consciousness. So much energy has been devoted in Berlin. And she said yes, and she's saying last night when I was in a car, and this is true, I went past the Jewish memorial that was built. It's quite a stunning memorial that was built by an architect. I think his name was Liebeskind. It must be over 10 years, maybe 12, 13 years ago. And it's, if you haven't seen it, it's the most incredible thing. It's just slabs of stone. And this memorial, she says, for the murdered Jews of Europe, she said, is the lesson that she would want to leave me with. She said that at the moment she feels it's so sad how, in a way, it's almost repeating itself, this hatred for Jewish people. And she feels that we have got to be so conscious of this, because this mustn't repeat itself as it happened before, where people began to pick on a particular faith or a particular people and then start blaming them for all the ills of the world. Okay, but I can see that, Elizabeth, but there are equally a number of people who are very, very frustrated and very perturbed about maybe what they would call almost overkill of what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians at the moment. How do you square this circle? How can you make people understand that they should feel sympathetic towards the regime that seems to be on the surface at the moment, in certain respects, justifiably showing some form of revenge, but almost overkill in terms of the revenge? She said, I need to think about how to phrase this to you, but give me a minute and I will. She says, I and the rest of humanity must stop seeing things in terms of numbers. The hatred that exists in the Palestinian, in the Arab side, she said, is enormous. And they also have tremendous killing amongst themselves. She says the hatred and the anger that exists in the Israeli side is also enormous. And they are also, she says, many people within their community that hate what is happening. She says, as hard as it is for us in our human capacity to see it, because we always see things in terms of numbers, in terms of how many millions of this or how many hundreds of thousands of that. She said we mustn't see it like that, because at the end of the day, in history, when you see things, it won't be the numbers, it'll be the atrocity. She said there are many examples in human history where maybe a few people had something atrocious happen to them, and they've been remembered as far more relevant or in human memory than perhaps the murder of thousands of people in another theatre. And she said, so just, please don't always see things in terms of how many hundreds of thousands of people are killed versus a few people here. It's all the same, she said. It's all a really unpleasant hate that exists. And the message she wants to give is, whether it's to the Jewish people or the people who dislike Jewish people, or to the Palestinians and the people who dislike Palestinians, it's all about hate. And that's what needs to change. And that's the way society on earth needs to develop, to get to that understanding that the only way that we're truly moving on, and so many people are trying to help us move on that are not alive, is for us to stop this hate for each other, and to stop this need to always brutalize each other, to have an understanding and a love for each other, to try to live together. That, she said, would be my biggest message, because until we reach that level, these types of atrocities will carry on happening for so long. But she said there is good news, and she would want to end at this point. She says there is good news. She says these terrible wars that are happening at the moment are soon going to end. She's absolutely certain of that. And as a result of this, as with many wars, they will become a defining feature that will perhaps help people to limit having these wars again in the future. And she's saying, in a way, as cruel as this may sound from my point of view, she says, to you on earth, in a way, it's almost like the means has to justify the ends. Yes, don't think about the so many that had to die to make these ends come. But these ends will come, and all of this has a purpose to make these ends come. And that's really all you'd like to say? Yes, Philip, that's all I really want to say. Okay, well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. This was quite an astonishing 40 minutes or so, and I'm sure there's going to be so much more information that people would like to know that I haven't been able to ask, but my mind is really running out now. And she's actually saying to me that she and other people will be very happy to come through to talk to me. And she's saying to me, yeah, and I would say the same, if you really want to have some specific questions asked through me, through Philip, send Philip a message, and maybe he can do it that way. All right, well, I will do that. So thank you very much. It's been quite an incredible experience for me. I feel pretty drained, I have to say. I don't really know what else to say or ask, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.